Hi, my name is Charlotte.
And I'm Brandy.
And welcome back to Unspoken Transitions, where we talk about the nuances of adulthood and the things that people don't really talk about. So today's topic is going to be about church hurt. As Christians, we go to church, but we recognize that Christians are not perfect people. So we're going to talk about church hurt, how it affects us as individuals, and also as our growth in our relationship with God, and also some other areas. So
yeah, and just our experiences growing up in the Haitian Church too.
Yes.
So I'm excited for this one.
No, same, because like it's gonna be a good release. So we can talk about what it was like growing up. So thinking about what you didn't like about growing up in a Haitian church, like what are some things that annoyed you or stood out to you?
I think when I was younger, how long the services were, especially like the moisson services. Specific services were just extra long for no reason. And as a kid, you know, I don't think I appreciated it that much. I was like, I kind of want to go home. So yeah, the services were really, really long for the most part. And I felt like it was more tailored towards the adults when I was a kid. So I didn't feel like there was really much for me to do as a kid. I mean, hanging out with the other kids was cool. That was fun. But in terms of being in the service, the sermons, when I was a kid, I think I found them to be pretty boring. And I was like, why are they screaming at us? So that was my experience as a kid for sure. Yeah. What didn't you like about the Haitian church, growing up in the Haitian church?
Very similar. So I didn't like that it was 3 hours, and I thought things could be more condensed. Like, why are we singing after everything? That's what really annoyed me. We do the opening song, right? And then we pray before we read, and then after we read, we sing before doing offering, and then during offering, we sing, and then there's like a long pastoral prayer. Literally, like, growing up, the pastoral prayer was like 30 minutes minimum. It was like 30 minutes to 45 minutes of like just straight praying, and I'm just using that as my personal nap time, if I'm being real. I'm not about to like stay up through all that.
And then, as a kid, I used to think the pastoral prayer was like the actual sermon, and then they would do the sermon. I'm like, what was that? But keep going.
Yeah, you think they just started preaching, but you're like, wait, no, they're not 30 minutes into preaching. They're 30 minutes into their prayer, and this is the prelude before we start actually. Yeah, it was this constant singing really annoyed me, because we don't need a song, a 5-verse chant d'espérance song for every transition into the next part. So that annoyed me. I didn't like the aesthetic of the church growing up. It was just it was wrong, it was stinky, it was just incorrect to me, did not like it.
Typical Haitian church in the city.
Yeah, like, didn't like it. And then something that really annoyed me was the double translating. Like, I can speak both English and Creole, so having, and then Jesus went to the rock, Jésus allait en Washla, and then it's like, and then Jesus went up the hill. Okay, Jésus monte les monts. I'm just like, okay, so I'm hearing the same thing twice. I feel like it's easier for those who speak one language, because you don't understand the other one, so at least you can just like focus on one. But I could not stand the double translation.
That's so funny. I liked it.
Oh, you're bugging for that.
I liked it. I think, and it helped me practice my Creole too. Yeah, because I would hear the words and I would be like, oh, I think I know what they're gonna say, and then they would say it. But that was just a personal. Clearly.
No, I could not, because like I think as a kid I couldn't shut it off, or I'll try to shut it off, but I still understand both. And then at some point, because you're doing so much like translating and focusing on one, you just zone out, and then you missed half the message, or maybe you miss a French word, and then in English they didn't translate. It was too much. I just couldn't handle it as a kid. And like you said, I feel like it was very tailored to adults. So like, I'm an 8-year-old sitting in here, and I'm kind of just thinking like, when is this gonna be over? Because you know, for kids, a minute is like 5 is like 20 is like 2 hours. So you're just sitting there like, when can I leave? And then I don't know about your parents, but mine, after church, you're already there for 3 hours, and they're just talking.
Meeting, yeah.
Oh my gosh,
the after church meetings. Okay, that should have been number one.
No.
That should have been number one. It was awful, because I would be so hungry.
Yeah.
And they would feed us like animal crackers, and even at that point, it was like a fight to get some animal crackers.
Or the Frito-Lay, you get like one little 25-cent.
You have to go to the corner store to just get something to.
And the meetings, like I feel like now they're better, but back then the meetings used to be like an hour and a half, 2 hours on top of everything. And if it's like you said a maswa, like that's the church anniversary, it's already, if services are typically 2 to 3 hours, it automatically will be 4 to 5, growing up at least. Like they're better now, but it will be 4 to 5. And then after that, they would have like eating celebration afterwards. So that's like, you'd be in there, especially because I had to drive like 30 minutes growing up.
Same.
You'd be in there from like 10:30 a.m. for Sunday school until 11:30, and then 11:30 to like 3 on like the special event days, till 3, and then from 3 to 5 would be like the celebration eating, and then you got to go home. So some days you didn't get home till like 5:36. So
and even trying to leave that parking lot. Like, please don't park in the parking lot, because some people just wouldn't want to leave the church and they're blocking your car, and then everyone was just we were just sardines in the parking lot. There was a lot going on.
The parking lot was so valid because okay, just context. There were no lines. Like, you know how a normal parking lot, there's lines? There were no lines. No. It was just like, just think of just concrete, just like land, essentially.
People making makeshift parking spots, blocking the entrance. People would block the entrance. They would block the
entrance. Like if the entrance was right here, then like cars would be leading all the way up until you get to the front of the church. People are parking forward, sideways, diagonal. Everyone's just squishing in, and like it will be all the way to the exit. So you couldn't get out. Maybe you can get in for sure, but you could not get out. And when I finally got my license, I was like, I'm not dealing with this, I'm not doing this, so I'm just gonna park outside of the gate, like just a little bit outside. So if I want to leave, I can just leave. Like there's no trouble. But like my parents used to get mad at me because they were just like, oh, like people are gonna steal your car, like you need to put it inside like the parking area. I was like, honestly, I don't even care. I want to get out. So you just brought back a memory that I completely forgot about. The parking, like
it was a situation.
No, for real.
It's
like
situation.
We can talk about what we did like what did you like about it?
Oh, I really like Sunday school. I love my Sunday school teachers up until like the middle school. I feel like elementary school and under was really fun. You could color, you had all of these fun activity pages. I loved Sunday school.
Yeah, I don't feel the same way.
I just like Sunday school.
I already had a long week in elementary school, you know, waking up early and then coming home, and then I have to wake up early again to go to Sunday school. Like, let me tell you what I liked about, I didn't really like Sunday school. I liked children's ministry. I liked being able to watch movies and have a Christmas party on Christmas and like get away, essentially just get away from like being upstairs and have that break and stuff like that, but not necessarily me liking Sunday school. It just seemed like another thing to do, and I didn't like it as a kid. And growing up, I think it just caused bigger problems because, like, you know, when you're a kid, they're just going to teach Jesus and him being in the desert for 40 days, and then we're talking just about the stories like Genesis, like Adam and Eve, and we're talking about Noah. They just focus on the stories, the bigger picture, just so you can understand the Bible a little bit more. But as I got older to like the middle school and like high school, I felt like it just got more biased, and like the culture started like kicking in. It was like, oh, this is bad, and I'm like, okay, so where does it say that in the text? So that kind of like annoyed me. But we can dive into that in a second. Why? Okay, did you stay at a Haitian church? And if you did, then why?
Okay, I did.
We're talking all the trash we did.
I did, and I also think my experience is unique because I'm a pastor's kid. So as a pastor's kid, you don't really have a choice. Like, your parents' church, that's your church, you know what I mean? So that's one of the main reasons why I'm still in a Haitian church today. And yeah, it's challenging though, because I visited other non-Haitian churches, non-denominational churches, things like that, but for some reason I miss the Haitian church. I love the songs of the Saint Espérance, all of that. And I don't know, there's something about it, the community that you have and you build within the Haitian church, that's really hard, or that I haven't found elsewhere. So I find myself coming back or just feeling so at home in a Haitian church a lot of the time. And there are also a lot of things that I don't agree with in a Haitian church. But one of the main reasons why is, you know, being a pastor's kid and how involved I am in my church as well. So I think that's a big piece.
I see.
Yeah.
For me, I left several times, but God just kept bringing me back. He just said, okay, you're leaving. All right, redirect, you're gonna go. So I will say that going to an American church is refreshing because for me it's less mental work. Like I can go, like you said, the songs, certain church, you know, it just depends on the church. Like if you go to a more Pentecostal church, like you get in the music, you get in the sermon, like you get in like the whole, like it's a whole experience, and it's less work on you because you're American. Go to American church, it's English songs, English preaching. Like they know how to cater to the American culture and people our age and even younger. So it's less work and it's easier to get like a message. Whereas in Haitian churches, it's a little bit harder because you'll go sometimes, like depending on if the preaching or the message is biased, you have to like nitpick what the main point is for you and try to like choose it. But I've gone to different churches and like I tried to be involved over there. I was like, all right, let me do praise team, like let me get involved. And then like I am trying to get involved and like maybe I am involved a little bit, and then God is just like, oh, and then someone will reach out to me from the Haitian church. I'm like, oh yeah, you want to like help here? And then somehow I completely get engrossed back into the Haitian church, not even like intentionally, but like I just get dragged back, and then I leave again, and then I get dragged back again. So I was like, okay. So the reason why I'm still at a Haitian church is because I'm called to it and God has called me to it. It's not because like I'm like, oh, because I do love the songs. The Jeune experience for me hit now as an adult. Yeah. But as a kid, I'm like, please, can we get some like something else? Like, can we add some beats to, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's make it more like youth friendly or whatever. But now it hits because I'm an adult who has like experiences and like the words, and
they really are like meaningful now.
Yes, it makes sense. So that's what I like about it. Like and like you said, the community also. I don't think you'll find that strong sense of community like you have in a Haitian church. So for example, like yes, my mother goes to the Haitian church, but also everybody's your mother. Like everybody's your mother. All of the older women are your mother. Like all the like older men are like the fathers. Like everyone
for you,
it's like a community. Like everyone like, oh, did you eat? Like, oh, did you do this? Did you do that? Like everyone's trying to help you and try to support you and everything. 100%. So yeah, like I appreciate that more as an adult, I think. And but also, like we said earlier, the reason why we might appreciate it as an adult is because they cater to adults. Right. So like
that's true. That's very true. But there's clearly a gap when it comes to, you know, children and youth especially. So many youth are leaving the church. So many youth are leaving the Haitian church.
Yes.
Because of church hurt and just
it makes sense. Like church hurt, I'm trying to think, because I've never, at least not that I can think of, the church hasn't blatantly done anything like crazy to me, but in terms of church hurt, what really bothered me was just the biasness. Like there's just so much bias. Like I was mentioning earlier, the fact that you hear a sermon and they're out here saying like, oh, all youth are going to hell, or like youth are terrible, like you youth are sinners, and like you're just doing terrible things and you need to get it together, or like you're gonna feel the hell's flames. And I'm kind of just like, what about adults? Like and that's what I'm saying, you know, it's crazy. As a kid, they kept like doing that message so many times. I did not think that adults sinned. I thought like once you reach adulthood, like that's it. Like you're just a sinner as a child, and then once you hit grown, like older people stages, you're washed clean and like you're good to go. Because I didn't usually hear just all-encompassing messages. It was like youth, kids, youth, young adults, drugs. You guys are on drugs. Like you guys are. Like,
always drugs.
It's always drugs.
We just skip over everything.
Like you're going to hell, and I'm just like, okay, like you liars, you are like, and then it's like, oh, respect your parents, and like, oh, you kids are so terrible, and then the parents are like, and you're just like, bro.
But that's really tough because it's not giving youth a realistic understanding of what it means to be a Christian, what it means to have a relationship with God and your own walk. It's not realistic.
I think
that's why so many people leave, because they're given not false narratives per se, but like you said, very biased and selective narratives. Like, let me take this one little verse and chapter and, like, you know, construe it in a way that just is influenced more, I feel like, by the Haitian culture than it is by the actual word.
Yes, exactly. Like, an example I can think of is when they were saying, like, oh, if you have a tattoo, you're going to hell, right? And it's just like, where does it say that? Like, you can just say you don't like tattoos. Like, it's completely fine. You can say that. But the fact that you're going into public and you're seeing people on the streets and you're just like, oh, you're going to hell. So I remember having a conversation with someone. They're like, oh, this person has a tattoo, they're going to hell. And I was just like, no, they're not. And I'm like, oh, even if we want to put tattoos in a category of being a sin, I was like, you sinning does not equal you going to hell regardless. Like, oh no, like, them having a tattoo speaks to their character and who they are and stuff like that. I'm like, you don't know them. I was like, what if they found God yesterday? Like, who told you tattoos are a sin? Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, making these judgments, and then if you try to call them out and say like, hey, you shouldn't be judging somebody for their lifestyle or what they're doing, regardless of like how you feel. You're just like, oh no, like, that's bad. Like, I'm like, come on, like.
Yeah, and like construing that one sin is greater than the other. Like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, but, you know, then you're gossiping. Like, that's also not good either. Like, why are we, it's like a tit for tat.
Exactly.
Almost. Yeah.
Like, oh, I'll be like, oh, why are you gossiping? Like, oh no, I'm not gossiping. I'm just saying we pray for them. I'm like, oh, you know,
it doesn't sound like
it
that.
It doesn't really sound like that. And you're kind of just saying things to make it seem good and seem pretty, but ultimately you're not acting Christ-like. You're not exhibiting Christ-like qualities when you're gossiping, when you're like saying, oh, someone's going to hell and stuff like that. Or like, you don't know, and you can't be so confident in saying that this person's going to hell when you don't know them, you don't know their spiritual life, you don't know their relationship with God. So
it ostracizes people to the point where people feel ashamed to come back, or oh, I've done this thing, I can't go back to the Haitian church, they won't accept me. And that's how we lose people too. It's like, why don't we welcome them in? Why don't we tell them about like reconciliation and, you know, forgiveness and repentance and things like that, as opposed to just kicking them to the curb.
Yeah,
anyways,
it's really tough, because I think that's a good point, especially because they always want to complain, like, we don't have new youth coming in, like, it's the same people, it's the same 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. But if somebody comes in with, I don't know, red hair, it's like you're looking them up and down, you're judging them, you're creating such a judgmental environment that somebody who is not specifically Haitian, like, who understands the culture, you don't even feel comfortable inviting them. Like, oh, invite your friends. It's like, I can't invite my friends if your sermon this Sunday is going to be saying, oh, you're going to hell because you're wearing your shoulders showing. You know what I'm saying? It's just, you can't, like, I can, but I'm not trying to make my friends uncomfortable, which makes people who you can invite to the church very selective. And it has to be Haitian, like, Haitian American, or just a Haitian person, or else they're going to get offended and just also have the wrong idea of Christianity in general because of all the judgment. Like, you see, like, I told you this is how Christians act, because look, like, they're judging me, like, they're putting me down. The whole sermon was about how I'm going to hell. Like, you see how, like, judgmental and messed up they are. So that's a big thing, why, like, we don't have youth, and why, like, there are not as many, or why there's gaps in generations in terms of, like, new people who are coming into the church too.
Yeah, that's such an important point that you brought up of bringing visitors in, like, especially if they don't have the cultural context. That could be so scary and maybe, like, steer people astray. But do you think that there is hope for youth within the Haitian church?
I was having this conversation with my brother the other day, and I think that it's gonna sound really bad, but I think until the people our age become old enough to lead the church and the other ones kind of retire, essentially, like, they're too old, like they're 80 or like 85, and they're just unable to lead the church at the capacity that they are, that is when we will see the change. Because then we'll have people our age who understand, if we stay, and that's another thing too, if we choose to stay, to make that difference, to understand the perspective of wanting to keep the Haitian culture in the sense of music and, like, service, but not necessarily ingraining it into the teachings and stuff like that. So if I'm being real, like, I have a cousin that's like 13, so I said maybe in 20 years when she's 30 or maybe when she's like 23, that's when we'll be able to see the change that we've been seeking and wanting since we were kids. That's what I think.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, I think that it's really hard because the people our age that have tried so hard to implement change, they're leaving because they keep getting so much pushback to the point where I think a lot of people are saying, I can't do this anymore. It's not worth it. I'm gonna go and plant my roots in a church that will actually embrace the change that I want to see. And I think the only hope is if there's a mindset change, which seems so far-fetched. But I have hope and I have faith that hopefully that will change and they will be more accepting and give more leadership opportunities to people our age that actually want to do things for the better. And I'm excited to see kind of the Haitian American generation, not the Haitian immigrant, but the Haitian American generation, to like merge all of those together into hopefully what I think the new Haitian Church will look like. I would love to see that.
Yeah, we're gonna see it when we're like 50. Don't worry, we're gonna see it. And like you said before, in terms of the leaders and stuff like that, like I've grown up with some leaders who were such strong leaders when they were in their teens and young adulthood, and I was just like, you know, a kid or preteen or whatever. And I've seen them thrive at other churches. I've seen them start their own churches, and it's just like, if you just held on to this talent and you just like really fed into it and nurtured it, how far would the church be? Like, they wouldn't be serving another church or their own church in some capacity. We would have benefited from it, and like we would have seen how the church grew so much. But because, like you said, they pushed, reached the point where like people were like, you know what, like I'm not trying to do this, let me go somewhere where they actually welcome me. And it's great to see how far they've gotten, but it's sad to see that you pushed away such a great talent. And they are open to it, at least in the Haitian church that I go to, because like in music they have youth Sundays, and you know, just implementing they're trying, but also like it's just their culture and it's so deep rooted. But I think that it's sad that it took the loss of a generation of people and like young adults or even adults in order for them to be like, oh snap, if we don't listen, then we're gonna lose everybody. So I think they're learning, but they can't go from A to Z that quickly. I definitely think it'll take a couple of decades for sure.
Yeah, it'll take some time. So my question for you is, how have you used your own talents within your church ministry, and what recommendations do you have for people who do want to get involved, who don't know where to start, who don't know what their talents might be, but want to get involved in their church in some capacity?
I think first it's important to know that just because you want to be a part of the church, it doesn't mean that you have to be a leader. Like, you don't have to lead a whole ministry, you don't have to direct a whole ministry, you can just support and be hands-on. I think a lot of people in the church, they say you're not a leader or like you're not working for God unless you are in the directory capacity and stuff like that. So what I would recommend is picking something that you wouldn't mind doing, like literally wouldn't mind doing it. Like if you're like, oh, kids are chill, like, or you enjoy doing Sunday school, for example, volunteer for Sunday school. You don't need to lead it, but like you can support it. If you want to lead it, go ahead, but like you can start off just volunteering, supporting for children's service, for example. And then from there, like, you can grow and understand what you want to do, and then maybe you'll see another opportunity to come up. I say just go where you feel like you're being called to, and then from there God will work through you. Definitely pray on it, make sure that you're doing it for you to work for God rather than you trying to work for recognition of a title, because the titles don't matter at all.
They don't.
No. So remind yourself, like, yes, you might be a great singer, but when you're praising in your leading praise team, don't be focusing on like, oh, I hit that like run, or like, oh, like I sounded good here, or like, oh, people were feeling me leading this song. Like, no, it is about you leading people into worship so they can worship God. Take yourself out of it. So all in all, I say find something that you wouldn't mind doing, or something that you're somewhat interested in, explore it, and even if you do it for a couple years, you don't have to stick with it forever. You can always pivot and change and like just lean into things and just pray, and God will work through you to like show you an opportunity of what you can do in the church and what is like missing, and how your talents and innate skills can do it. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that supporting in the church does not always equal like children's ministry or like praise team or things that are seen. It can also be, for example, there was a church I went to, there was somebody who helped direct traffic, right? And that was really important. They're the first face you see. They say, oh, good morning, like make people feel welcome. Or they serve food, like you help support in serving food in the church. Or maybe you support on social media. Like it doesn't, just because you're not being seen, it doesn't mean that like you are not supporting. I think that's important to say too, but just praying and see what God calls you to, and just let him work through you, essentially.
Yeah. That was so well said. I second all of that. And in terms of options, every church is different in terms of what might be available to do, but I think there's always room to try something new. And at first when I was participating in my church, I was almost voluntold to do a lot of things. And then I gradually started understanding what I like more. So I was like, okay, I like working with children. I like Sunday school. I like, you know, worship team. I don't know if that's for me, not so much, but I did enjoy ushering or even working with social media. I know that's becoming a bigger thing in churches, whether they have their YouTubes, audio recordings, PowerPoints. The media ministry is huge. Like tap into that, or you know, even leading a Bible study on a smaller scale. There's just so many avenues that you can take. So yeah
100%. And I guess the last thing I'll say in terms of church, like you're gonna join a church, no churches are gonna be perfect because people are not perfect. People are gonna mess up, people have issues. Like yes, people call themselves a Christian and like they are trying to grow in their walk with God and try to be closer to him, but we don't know where people are, and maybe you personally have overcome gossiping, but this person has not. Maybe you have overcome projecting, but this person has not. So they are hurting you. Don't say, oh, this Christian person is hurting me. It's a person who sins who is hurting you. It's not God punishing you. Like we can't put people in the church on a pedestal and then when we get hurt say, oh, God isn't good. That has nothing to do with God. People are just people and they do things, and we all are going through things. We all have our own traumas and things that we all got issues. I always say this, but we all have issues, and we all should be working on them actively, but some people are not. So if you find a church where you feel like you're being judged, you feel like you're being put down, you feel like, I don't even know, I've heard of some churches where like they make you pay a fee, like you feel like you're being manipulated. Like if it does not sound biblical, if it does not describe what love is, like love is patient, love is kind, like if it's not describing that verse, can't tell you what it is, then you should not stay there, if I'm being real. Like if it's just one person acting out and you can just pray for them and avoid them, not avoid them in the sense of having hate, but just like stay away from somebody who's not feeding into you positively, then do that. But people in the church are going to hurt you because again, people are bad. God does not mean that God is bad. It doesn't mean that God is forsaking you. They might even do a wrong preaching, for example, but it's up to you in your relationship with God to have an individual relationship, so you can discern, this message is wrong, like this person is attacking me, but that's not what the Bible says. Or like you're never going to find a perfect church with perfect worship and perfect people and like perfect everything. It's just for you to focus on a relationship with God and not lean on the church as your only source, because the church is a source for you to feed yourself, but not necessarily the only source for you to grow in your walk. You need a relationship with Jesus. The church feeds into you. You need the community for you to work with one another. But if you've been hurt by the church, I will never invalidate that. Like things happen, people do things, like people have free will, right? People have free will, and people with their free will use it for good and sometimes for terrible things. So find a community that works for you. It doesn't, like I said, 2 or 3 people. It doesn't even need to be like a whole bunch of people. Like let's say you go to a church or 2 churches or 3 churches and your church burnt out right now and you've just been hurt by too many people spreading the wrong message and everything. Maybe take a break, right? Focus on a Bible study you find online. Like just have one person even that you can talk to about the word of God, and that can be your sense of community. It doesn't have to be like a big thing. Or if you've been hurt by too many ministries in the church, pull back from ministry. Maybe not serve in that capacity. Feed into your friends. Ask God to work through you in other capacities that's not necessarily in the church, and go from there. But again, God is good, people are not, and the hurt you feel in the church is valid and it is real, but don't connect that to God, because even back in like slave days, people use that to hurt others, and unfortunately we like to manipulate and twist things for power, for whatever issues that we have. But that does not mean that God is not good, and that does not mean that Christians are bad because they're just being a poor representation of what God resembles. So
Word. A word.
But yeah, so thank you for listening. If you have any questions, comments, anything, feel free to send an email to unspokentransitions@gmail.com, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, thanks for listening, y'all.
Thank you for listening.